Welcome to Sabbath Truth, a show where we break down the political truths that do not make sense in our country. A show that damages our ignorance about parallels in history and our own reality. A show that borrows from historical mysteries to explain our own trajectory as a country. And we call it the Sabbath Truth because on Sabbath, we must bear our hearts out. We must ask why the Son of Elohim was crucified between two thieves. What was the significance of this?
Indeed.
And if Jesus was black, what is the Sabbath truth about our history as Africans? In this show, we will tackle the hard questions about history and politics. But we will only do it during Sabbath because this is a moment of grace. Welcome to the show. I am DK.
I am AX.
And I am GK. Today, we want to submit again that Uhuru Kenyatta wanted to make Ruto president. And this is why he acted completely suboptimally in this election. He allowed Ruto to inherit Kikuyus without a fight. Then he disabled the deep state completely. If he had not, they would have rigged the 69,000 votes that thrusted Ruto to the presidency and given them to Raila. But Uhuru did not. And the question is, why? Our hypothesis is that Uhuru spoke to Ruto regularly. They knew that if Uhuru supported Ruto openly, the 2022 election would have made the French Revolution look like a Sunday school picnic. The strategy, therefore, was to co-opt Raila, romance him with state power and money, then disable him. And it worked. The Raila we saw in 2017 was half the man we saw in 2022. He was completely disarmed, weak, and directionless. For Uhuru, this strategy worked perfectly. He would heal the historical wounds between his family and the Odingas, but above all, he would pay two debts. One owed to the Luo nation for supporting Jomo Kenyatta at independence, and one owed to William Ruto. For him, this was a win-win strategy. But there was a problem.
Tell us.
How were Uhuru and Ruto meant to execute such a complex plan? It was very simple, and we will explain it using a riddle. Once upon a time, a farmer went to the market and bought a goat, a wolf, and some cabbage. On his way back home, he had to cross a river by boat, and he had to carry the goat, the wolf, and the cabbage. However, his small boat could only carry him and one of the three items. This meant that he had to leave two of the items on one side of the river as he carried himself and one item to the other side.
Okay, this makes sense.
But there was a dilemma.
Yes.
If he carried the cabbage first, he had to leave the wolf and the goat on the other side of the river. And if he did this, the wolf would eat the goat.
Yes.
But if he took the wolf to the other side first, he would have to leave the goat with the cabbage, and the goat would eat the cabbage. He had to think hard and calculate. And these are the calculations that Uhuru and Ruto did ahead of the 2022 election. This is why this election continues to baffle country. First, the farmer carried the goat to the other side of the river, away from the wolf, and left the wolf with the cabbage.
Okay.
Then he collected the wolf and deposited it where the goat was, leaving the cabbage alone on the other side of the river.
Okay.
After depositing the wolf where the goat was, he took the goat back and returned it to the opposite side of the river. And because he could not leave the goat with the cabbage, he took the cabbage next.
Okay.
Then he crossed the river with the cabbage to where the wolf was. Shortly after, he traveled back to collect the goat. Once he crossed the river with the goat, he was reunited with the wolf and the cabbage. Mission accomplished.
Hooray.
And this is how complex the Uhuru-Ruto game was. But who was the wolf, the goat, and the cabbage? And why did they have to be separated?
In this riddle, Uhuru Kenyatta was the farmer who had to balance between three items. Raila was the wolf that scared his presidency into a handshake. William Ruto was the tender goat that he needed to make president. And the cabbage were the government tenders. If he left the wolf Raila to compete with the goat Ruto, Raila was going to maul Ruto like a nonsense. That is why Uhuru had to embrace and pacify the wolf through a handshake. But Uhuru also knew that if he left the cabbage or government tenders with Ruto the goat would eat them without mercy. This is why he aggressed Ruto in public, but romanced him in private. True story. But there is a problem here. If Uhuru believed that Ruto was the goat that would eat the government tenders, what was the logic of giving him the entire government?
That's my question.
His reasoning here was simple. One, if Ruto had an appetite for cabbage, Uhuru knew that his deputy wanted the tenders to propel him to the presidency. Once Ruto becomes president, this appetite would die. And the logic is that you can only eat so much cabbage as a goat. More so if you have all the cabbage in the world. Two, Uhuru knew that if he made the goat president, there would be an angry wolf called Baba Man hovering around the fences of State House. This way, the goat would be kept busy by the hungry wolf and its cubs. Appetite for cabbage would be reduced by the fear of salivating wolves. And that was the complex plan. Take it or leave it. Now we must return to Dr. Ruto and his speech on Mashujaa Day. And we will give him the Sabbath truth on this. We were not inspired by the speech. It was a boring patchwork of policy intentions, and in our view, that is okay. We can live with boredom for now. The president is still raw and his horns are yet to dry up. We also noted that the stadium was empty. And on this, we would like to remind the media that country is suffering from political fatigue. That is why the hustlers did not attend the celebrations. It is that simple. Going forward, for President Ruto, we must remind him that God chose him to do a job. And then men chose themselves to advise him on how the job should be done. And that is why we must give him the story of a miller, his son, and their donkey. The three were walking happily to a market with the son aboard the donkey. Then they passed a group of men who exclaimed, "What a lazy son, letting his father walk while he rides the donkey." So the miller lowered his son and climbed on the donkey. Shortly after, a crowd of women exclaimed, "What a lazy man, riding his donkey as his little son walks." And so the miller grabbed his son and they both rode the donkey. But then they met a prophet who told them that they were overloading the donkey. And so they tied the donkey to a long pole and carried it on their shoulders. But as they crossed the bridge, the rope that tied the donkey cut and the donkey fell into the river and drowned. Listening to the wisdom of the crowds will only drown your donkey. As President Mr. Ruto, sir, you must not listen to people. You must listen only to your own purpose.
Wow, fantastic.
If Uhuru wanted to make Ruto president and they executed such an elaborate scheme, what is the Sabbath truth for the hustler nation? Once upon a time, a curious little girl was having a philosophical conversation with her father. They were discussing a book called Sophie's Philosophy, which we recommend all our viewers. Then at some point, the girl asked the father, "What exactly is politics? I do not understand it." The father, baffled by this pedestrian question, turned to the little girl and told her, "I will give you an example. You see, I am the one who supports this family. So I am the capitalist. Your mother is the administrator of the money I make. She is the government. Okay? The housemaid does all our chores, and so she is the working class. And since I take care of all your needs, we shall call you the people. Your little brother does not know what he's here for yet, and so we will call him the future. This, my little girl, is what we call politics. The little girl thought that this answer was simplistic, especially after discussing the philosophical book they had just read. In this book, the father had told her that you cannot cross a river twice. And this is because in a river, the water passes by only once. Unhappy with her father's definition of politics, the girl went to bed. That night, she was woken up by her crying brother who had poop oozing all over his diapers.
Okay.
She ran to the parents' bedroom for help and found the mother sound asleep alone.
Okay.
Then she ran to the housemaid's room and knocked at the door violently. There was no response. But when she peeped at the room through the keyhole, she saw her father in bed with a maid. The poor girl retired to bed helpless. Then the next morning, she told the father that now she understands politics. And the father asked her to explain what she meant. She said, if the father is capitalism, the mother is government, the housemaid is the working class, I am the people, and my little brother is the future, then I know what politics is. Politics is when the father sleeps with the working class.
Okay.
The government is dead asleep. The people are completely ignored, and the future is full of poop. Dear Hustler Nation, this is the definition of politics for you. The billionaires you appointed into cabinet will sleep with the working class. The government will be dead asleep when you call out for help. And the future of your children will be drained in poop. And that is the Sabbath truth for you. But President William Ruto can change this. If the book Sophie's Philosophy taught us that you cannot cross a river twice, he does not have to do what other governments did. If the billionaires slept with the working class, he can change this. If the future of the hustler children was oozing with poop, he can salvage this. But as he does this, he must remember that there is a wolf hovering around the boundaries of State House. And maybe the fear of this wolf is what will drive Ruto to do the right thing.